Hello and welcome to TerraNash. I'm Aiden, your narrator for tonight. Let's take this time together to step away from the rush of the day and ease into a world of dreams and wonder. Let the world around you fade away as you settle into a peaceful, quiet space. Take a deep breath in and slowly exhale, letting the calmness fill your body. Let your shoulders relax, your hands rest gently in your lap, and let your mind start to unwind. Tonight, I'll tell you a story. The Little Lantern's Glow. It's a tale of a small, forgotten lantern tucked away in an attic, quietly dreaming of lighting up the world. When a kind child discovers it, the lantern's glow is brought to life, showing us that even the smallest light can make the biggest difference. But before we begin, we'd love to hear from you. Where are you listening from, and what time is it as you settle in to hear this story? We'd also love to know what kinds of stories you'd enjoy next. Your thoughts and suggestions inspire us, so please share them in the comments below. If you'd like even more from us, you can check out our Patreon for early access to all our stories and a curated Spotify playlist as well. And if you've been enjoying our bedtime stories, subscribing is a simple and free way to support us. Your support means the world to us, and together we can make TerraNash an even more peaceful place for storytelling. Now, as you close your eyes and let your body grow heavy and relaxed, allow the soft light of the little lantern to fill your thoughts. Picture its glow gently illuminating the quiet, peaceful attic as we begin this story. Listen closely and let each word carry you deeper into a world where even the smallest light can fill the darkest spaces. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Forgotten Lantern. In a forgotten corner of a dusty attic, tucked away beneath layers of time and hidden from view, sat a tiny lantern. Its once glorious brass frame had dulled with age, and the glass that protected its flickering flame had grown foggy, a reminder of years left undisturbed. The attic itself seemed to breathe with quiet stillness, the air thick with the scent of old wood and forgotten memories. Above the lantern, the rafters creaked softly, as if whispering tales of a time long past. The cobwebs in the corners clung to the shadows, waiting patiently for a time when the dust might stir once again. This small lantern, forgotten and hidden away in the attic, had once been a source of warmth and comfort. It had illuminated rooms filled with laughter and soft conversations, casting its gentle glow over the faces of loved ones. It had been there for quiet nights of reading, for moments when a flickering light was all that stood between the dark and the peace of home. But now, it sat in the silence, its light long extinguished, waiting for a chance to shine again. Though its flame was gone, its spirit still burned quietly within. It dreamed of lighting up the night once more, of being chosen and carried into the warmth of a home. The lantern longed to bring comfort again, to fill the room with a soft, glowing warmth that would push away the coldness of the world outside. But as it sat in its forgotten corner, it began to wonder if it would ever have that chance. It was small, far too small compared to the great, towering lamps it had seen lighting up the streets outside. It wasn't the grandest or the brightest, just a humble lantern, tucked away and unseen. Yet deep within its brass frame, there was a spark of hope, a hope that even the smallest light could make a difference. If only someone would see it, if only someone would find it again. The lantern could not help but dream of shining brightly, casting its soft light into the dark corners of the world. And maybe, just maybe, it could bring a little warmth to someone who needed it. The attic was quiet, the air still, but the lantern's heart beat with anticipation. It waited, hoping that one day someone would notice it, and when that moment came, it would be ready to light up the world once more. Chapter 2: The First Spark. For many years, the little lantern rested quietly in its dark corner of the attic, surrounded by forgotten treasures. The world outside changed, seasons passing in a blur of time. Yet, despite the growing silence, the lantern remained hopeful. Its once bright flame had faded, but it still carried a quiet, steady wish deep inside to light up the world again, even if only for a moment. It would often dream of its past, of the rooms it had once illuminated, children's laughter around the dinner table, the soft glow it provided to a reader lost in a book, and the comforting warmth it had shared with those feeling lonely or afraid of the dark. Now, it sat in the shadows of the attic, its small brass frame slightly tarnished, yearning to fulfill its purpose once again. But as the days turned into years, the lantern began to doubt. How could I ever shine again? It wondered, feeling insignificant in a world full of brighter, grander lights. It imagined the towering street lamps that illuminated the busy roads and the bright chandeliers that lit up grand dining halls. Despite its self-doubt, there was something stirring deep within the lantern. It wasn't the brightest, nor the biggest, but there was a gentle strength in its tiny glow, a strength that had never truly gone out. And as it sat there, hidden away in the attic, it began to realize that perhaps its size didn't matter. Perhaps its light, no matter how small, could still be meaningful. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky outside turned a deep shade of blue, something unusual happened. The attic door creaked open, sending a breeze through the room that stirred the dust and made the cobwebs tremble. The lantern felt a flicker of hope. Someone was coming. It was quiet at first, the soft sound of footsteps on the stairs, and then a small figure appeared in the doorway. A child, curious and gentle, her wide eyes scanning the room. She stepped cautiously into the attic, as if drawn to something in the far corner. The little lantern's heart fluttered with anticipation. Could this be the moment it had been waiting for? The child's eyes finally rested on the forgotten object. She bent down, her small fingers brushing away the dust that had settled over the lantern. For a moment, the lantern feared she would leave, just like all the others before her. But instead, she smiled, her face lighting up with wonder. She reached down, her fingers wrapping around the cold brass of the lantern. Carefully, the child examined it, wiping away more of the dust. And then, with a small match, she struck it against the side of the box, igniting a tiny spark. The lantern's heart beat faster. The wick caught fire. Slowly, softly, a warm glow began to fill the room. The lantern could feel the flame inside of it growing, steady and sure, as if it had never been extinguished. The light flickered, then steadied, casting a golden hue over the dusty attic. It was a small light, but it felt as if the entire room had been touched by its warmth. The child stood back, gazing at the lantern in awe, as its gentle glow filled the room. She smiled again, her eyes twinkling in the light. The lantern felt a surge of joy, as if it had finally found its place once more. It may have been small, but it was enough. In that quiet attic, with the soft light filling the corners of the room, the little lantern realized something important. Even the smallest glow could bring warmth and light to the world. And with that simple thought, the lantern knew it had found its purpose again. Chapter 3: A Glow in the Darkness. The little lantern had never felt so alive. For the first time in years, it was no longer shrouded in dust and neglect. The warmth from the tiny flame inside it spread outwards, touching the corners of the attic, casting soft, flickering shadows on the walls. The child, who had discovered it, watched in awe as the light grew brighter, her face glowing in the soft illumination. She had never seen such a small lantern before, and yet, in that moment, it seemed to have the power to make the entire attic feel like home. The lantern felt a sense of pride, something it hadn't felt in so long. It had been hidden away for so many years, forgotten in the shadows of time. But now it was shining again, and it was filling the room with a warmth it thought it would never feel again. The tiny flame danced gently, flickering as if it were a living thing, alive with purpose. It was only a small light, but the lantern could feel the impact of its glow, the way it made the shadows retreat, if only just a little. The child, whose name the lantern still didn't know, continued to gaze at the flame in wonder, her eyes wide with fascination. She moved closer, as if drawn to the gentle warmth. The lantern felt her presence like a soft touch, a reminder that even the smallest actions could make a big difference in the world. For so long, the lantern had wished for this moment, and now that it was here, it couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude. As the minutes passed, the child placed the lantern on a nearby table. The room seemed to glow with a new energy, the once dark corners now filled with a soft light. The lantern couldn't help but feel a deep sense of contentment. It was no longer forgotten in the attic, cast aside and left to gather dust. It was here, in the company of this child, lighting up the room in a way it hadn't done in years. But as the child smiled and continued to observe the light, the lantern's thoughts turned inward. It realized that it wasn't just the light it was offering that mattered. It was the warmth it brought to the child's heart, the peace it provided, the way it made the night feel a little less lonely. The lantern wasn't just lighting up the room, it was lighting up the child's world, even if for a moment. Outside, the night deepened, and the world beyond the attic was covered in darkness. But inside, the lantern continued to glow, a small beacon of light in the quiet, still room. The child gently picked it up, holding it carefully in her hands, as if she could sense the lantern's delicate nature, its quiet strength. The lantern, for the first time in many years, understood what it was meant to do. It wasn't about being the biggest or the brightest. It was about offering what it had, no matter how small, to those who needed it most. The warmth of the light, the peace it provided, was enough. And in that moment, the lantern realized that even in the darkest of times, the smallest light could make the biggest difference. As the child walked slowly toward the window, the lantern glowing in her hands, it felt something stir inside it, something new. The lantern had always known it had the power to light up a room, but now it understood that its light, however small, could help guide others through their own darkness. It had found its purpose, and in doing so, it had found the true power of its glow. Even in the smallest of lights, there was hope. Chapter 4: The Quiet Connection. As the night stretched on, the lantern glowed softly in the child's hands, casting a warm and gentle light across the room. The attic, once filled with shadows and forgotten memories, now seemed alive with a quiet presence. The child moved slowly, almost reverently, as if she could sense the significance of the lantern's soft glow. Her eyes lingered on the flickering flame, her fingers lightly tracing the brass frame, as if she could feel the history and the quiet strength that the little lantern held within. The lantern, for its part, felt a deep connection to the child. It had been so long since it had been held, so long since it had felt the touch of someone who needed its light. The warmth of her hands was like a gentle reassurance, a reminder that it still had a place in the world. For so many years, it had wondered if it would ever shine again, if its light would ever matter. But now, In the child's presence, the lantern felt a sense of peace, a sense of belonging. It wasn't just about the light it gave off. It was about the comfort it brought, the connection it formed. The soft flame, glowing steadily in the child's hands, had become a symbol of hope, a symbol of how even the smallest acts of light could make a difference. The child sat down on the floor, bringing the lantern close to her. She held it carefully in her lap, watching as the flickering flame danced, its light swaying gently in the quiet air. The lantern could feel the peace in the room, a calmness that seemed to fill every corner. It was as if, for a brief moment, the world outside had faded away, and the only thing that mattered was the soft glow in the child's hands. The lantern realized that it wasn't just giving light to the room. It was giving the child something far more valuable, a sense of security. The flame's warmth was a quiet reassurance, a gentle reminder that even in the dark, there was always light to guide the way. The child's gaze remained fixed on the lantern, her expression calm and content. There was a quiet understanding between them, an unspoken bond that went beyond the physical light it gave. It was as if, in that moment, the lantern had become more than just an object. It had become a friend, a companion to the child in the quiet of the night. The hours passed slowly, and the room remained bathed in the gentle light of the lantern. The child's eyelids grew heavy, her body sinking deeper into the warmth of the glow. The lantern, too, seemed content, its soft light flickering in a steady rhythm. It was no longer worried about how bright it shone, or how long it could keep the darkness at bay. In this quiet moment, it realized that it had fulfilled its purpose. It had offered its light to someone who needed it, and that was enough. As the child slowly drifted off to sleep, the lantern's flame continued to burn brightly, casting a soft glow over the room. The soft light filled the space with peace, and the attic, once filled with forgotten memories, now felt like a safe haven, a place where the smallest light could bring warmth, comfort, and hope. The lantern, now filled with a quiet sense of fulfillment, watched over the child, knowing that it had found its true purpose. It had shown that even the smallest light, in the darkest of times, could make all the difference. And in that simple truth, the lantern found peace. Chapter 5. The Light That Guides. The morning sun crept slowly over the horizon, casting its first golden rays through the small window at the far end of the attic. The light from the lantern had softened during the night, its glow dimming as the hours passed. But it had not faded completely. Now, as the daylight slowly began to pour into the attic, It seemed to mingle with the lantern's warm glow, creating a soft, peaceful harmony. The child, nestled on the floor, was still asleep, her face peaceful and serene, the gentle light of the lantern casting faint shadows across her sleeping form. The little lantern, ever so patient, remained at her side, its tiny flame still glowing steadily, though faintly now. It wasn't tired or fading. Instead, it was content. The warmth that had spread throughout the room last night was still lingering in the air, a quiet reminder that even in the absence of its light, the lantern's purpose had been fulfilled. But as the day slowly began to unfold, the lantern felt something stirring deep inside it, a quiet yearning. It wasn't ready to fade into the background, not yet. The child stirred in her sleep, her eyes fluttering open as the sunlight bathed the room in its golden glow. She blinked, then smiled softly when she saw the lantern, still glowing gently beside her. The child sat up slowly, her small hands wrapping around the lantern once more, her fingers brushing the cool brass. She gazed at the flame for a long moment, mesmerized by its flicker, before she carefully stood and walked to the window, the lantern in her hands. The morning light was soft and calm, casting a warm glow over everything it touched. The child's room, once a place of quiet solitude, now felt filled with a new kind of energy. It was as if the lantern's glow had helped transform the space, filling it with warmth and peace that lingered even as the day began. The child walked slowly to the window, the lantern held carefully in her hands, and placed it on the sill. She gazed out over the landscape, the distant trees bathed in the soft morning light, the world waking up from its night's slumber. The lantern, watching the child's expression as she stared out at the world beyond, felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The warmth from its flame wasn't just illuminating the room. It was lighting the way for the child's own journey, filling her heart with a sense of peace and comfort. The lantern knew that it wasn't just there to light up dark corners. It was there to help guide the child, to be a quiet companion in her own story. The light it offered was more than just a beacon in the dark. It was a light that guided, that comforted, and that showed the way forward, no matter how small it might seem. As the child continued to gaze out the window, her small fingers tracing the edge of the lantern couldn't help but reflect on the night before. In that quiet, peaceful moment, it had realized something profound. The light it offered wasn't just for the room, or even for the child. It was a light that reached out, a light that connected, a light that had the power to guide. Even though it was small, it mattered. It was more than just a physical object. It was a symbol, a reminder that no matter how dark the night seemed, there was always a light that could show the way. The lantern's tiny flame flickered, but it burned steady and strong, a soft glow in the child's hands. It didn't need to be the brightest or the biggest light. It simply needed to be a light that could be relied upon. And that was enough. In that moment, the lantern realized that it didn't need to shine for everyone or for all the world. It just needed to shine for those who needed it in their darkest moments. It could help guide them, even if only for a little while. As the day continued to unfold outside the window, the child sat quietly with the lantern, her small fingers gently stroking its brass frame. The lantern's glow filled the room with a soft, peaceful light, a reminder that even the smallest spark of light could guide someone through the darkness. And in that quiet, peaceful moment, the lantern understood its true purpose: to guide, to comfort, and to remind others that even in the darkest times, light could always be found, no matter how small it may seem. Chapter 6: The Heart of the Light. As the days passed, the lantern found itself becoming a constant companion in the child's life. It was placed on the bedside table every evening, a soft light glowing in the room as the child fell asleep. It lit the way during quiet moments, casting its gentle glow over the room, filling it with warmth and calm. The child, now more accustomed to the lantern's soft light, would often speak to it, as if the little lantern were a friend, a companion to whom she could confide her thoughts. One evening, as the child sat near the window once again, the lantern's glow brighter than before, she spoke softly to it. "You've been with me every night, little lantern," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "And each night, you make me feel safe, like I'm not alone. I've never had a light like you before. You're always there when I need you." The lantern, as always, flickered in response, though the child may not have known that it could hear her words. To the lantern, her voice was a melody, a comforting sound that it cherished deeply. It had never considered that it could offer something more than just light, more than just the soft glow that filled the room. But as the days passed, and it became a constant presence in the child's life, the lantern realized something profound. It wasn't the brightness of its light that mattered most. It was the warmth, the comfort, and the feeling of security it brought to those it touched. The child had grown to trust it, to rely on its gentle glow, and in doing so, the lantern realized it had become a symbol of something far more valuable. It was a source of peace, a source of comfort, and, most importantly, a source of hope. The lantern's glow continued to warm the room each night, but it was no longer just about being the light in the darkness. It had become a constant, a presence that offered reassurance, that quietly filled the spaces of the child's world with warmth. It had found its true purpose, not merely to illuminate the room, but to provide the child with a sense of calm in a world that could sometimes feel overwhelming. In this quiet companionship, the lantern had discovered that the heart of the light wasn't in how brightly it burned, but in how much peace and comfort it could bring. One evening, as the lantern's flame flickered and swayed, the child sat beside it, gazing out the window at the stars. The night was clear, the sky filled with 1,000 pinpricks of light. The child's fingers brushed the lantern's cool brass, and she smiled to herself. "I think you've taught me something, little lantern," she said softly. "You've taught me that even the smallest light can make the biggest difference, and that even when the world feels dark, we can always find our way, one small light at a time." The lantern's glow seemed to brighten ever so slightly in response to her words, as if it understood exactly what she meant. It had always known that its light was small, but now it understood something deeper, that its light didn't need to be large to make a difference. The most meaningful light was the one that illuminated the quiet, hidden corners of the world, the places where no one else might see. The lantern had been small, forgotten, and tucked away in an attic for so long. But now it was a source of light, comfort, and peace for the child. Its glow had touched something deep inside her, reminding her that even the smallest gestures, the gentlest lights, could bring hope to those who needed it most. As the night deepened and the child slowly drifted off to sleep, the lantern remained beside her, its tiny flame flickering softly in the quiet. The room was filled with peace, the soft light of the lantern offering a quiet reassurance to the child as she dreamed. The lantern, for the first time, felt truly content. It had found its place in the world, and in doing so, it had found the true heart of its light. It wasn't just a flame, it was a symbol of hope, a guide through the dark, and a reminder that no matter how small the light may seem, it could still make all the difference. Chapter 7. The lantern's glow spreads. As the days grew longer, the seasons slowly began to change. The light outside the window softened with the approach of autumn, casting a golden glow over everything it touched. But inside the child's room, the lantern continued to shine steadily, its warm, gentle light never faltering. It had become a beloved companion, a constant presence in the child's life, offering its soft glow each evening before sleep. The room had changed too, no longer a place of quiet solitude, but a space filled with warmth, peace, and the steady presence of light. It wasn't just the lantern's glow that filled the room now, but the light it had shared with the child, who had embraced it fully. One evening, as the child sat near the window, the lantern beside her, she looked down at it with a thoughtful expression. It had become such a familiar part of her life, something she couldn't imagine being without. As the lantern's light flickered gently, she spoke softly, almost as if to herself. "You've helped me more than I ever thought a little light could," she said. her voice filled with quiet gratitude. "I feel safe with you beside me. You make me believe that no matter how dark the world may seem, there's always light to guide me." The lantern's flame flickered in response to her words, its tiny light growing brighter for a brief moment, as if acknowledging the child's sentiment. It had never before understood the true extent of the difference it made. In the beginning, it had only wished to light the dark corners of the attic, to fill the room with warmth. But now, it realized its true purpose was much greater. It wasn't just about lighting the space. It was about giving the child hope, comfort, and a sense of security. The lantern's small glow had grown into something much more profound, touching the child's heart in ways it had never imagined. And just as the lantern had made a difference in the child's life, the child began to realize that the lantern's glow had the power to reach beyond their small world. She thought back to the moments when she had first found the lantern, tucked away and forgotten in the dusty attic. How it had been hidden away, its light smothered by time and neglect. But now, in her hands, the lantern was bright, its glow steady and warm. She wondered if there were others out there who needed the same kind of light, the same kind of comfort. And as the thought lingered in her mind, the child felt a gentle spark of inspiration, a desire to share the lantern's light with the world beyond her room. The following day, the child decided to take the lantern outside. She carefully wrapped it in a soft cloth, cradling it in her arms as she ventured out into the garden. The air was crisp with the promise of autumn, the trees beginning to shed their leaves. But the child felt a warmth inside her as she walked toward the edge of the garden. She paused for a moment, taking in the quiet beauty of the world around her. The sky was a soft blue, the sun's rays casting long shadows across the ground, and the lantern's glow, small but steady, filled the air with warmth. The child approached the small bench beneath the oak tree and set the lantern down beside her. She sat for a moment, gazing at the lantern's light, before turning her gaze toward the distant horizon. The soft glow seemed to soften the edges of the world, bringing a sense of peace and calm. And as she sat there, her heart filled with an overwhelming sense of connection. The lantern, though small, had shown her the power of light to transform not just a room, but a life. With a deep breath, the child stood, feeling the weight of the lantern in her hands. She knew that it wasn't just the glow of the lantern that made the difference. It was the love, the care, and the hope that it carried with it. And now, she wanted to share that same sense of peace and light with others. She gently placed the lantern on a small stone table in the center of the garden, then stepped back, admiring the soft glow that now filled the space around her. The light was small, but it seemed to touch everything it touched, transforming the garden into a place of quiet serenity. The child realized, in that moment, that the lantern's glow wasn't meant to be kept to herself. It was meant to be shared. And just as the lantern had helped her, it could help others too. The simple act of sharing its light, no matter how small, could make a world of difference. The child's heart swelled with a sense of purpose as she gazed at the lantern, its light shimmering softly in the afternoon sunlight. As the evening approached and the world began to settle into the quiet of twilight, the child returned to the house, bringing the lantern with her. But now she carried it with a new understanding, a realization that the light it offered wasn't meant to be confined to just one room or one person. It was meant to spread, to touch the lives of others and show them that even in the darkest of times, there was always a light that could guide them. And so, the lantern's glow continued to shine, both in the child's room and beyond, spreading its warmth and comfort to everyone it touched. The child had learned that even the smallest light could change the world, one gentle glow at a time. Chapter 8. A glow that travels far. As the days continued to pass, the seasons shifted once again, bringing with them cooler nights and the vibrant colors of autumn. The child, having grown fond of the lantern, now understood the true meaning of its glow. The little lantern had taught her that light wasn't just about shining brightly in the dark, but about offering comfort, security, and hope to those who needed it. And with this knowledge, the child began to share the lantern's warmth in ways she never thought possible. One chilly evening, as the soft winds rustled the leaves outside and the stars began to dot the sky like silver jewels, the child sat beside the lantern in her room, feeling a sense of quiet peace. It had become a ritual now, lighting the lantern before bed, letting its soft glow fill the room as she settled in for the night. But tonight was different. As the flame flickered in the soft breeze, the child's thoughts drifted to those beyond her immediate world. There were so many people who could benefit from the lantern's light, so many who might be struggling in the dark, whether with their thoughts, their feelings, or simply with the weight of the world around them. The thought of spreading the lantern's warmth and light beyond her home filled her heart with a deep sense of purpose. She stood up, carefully holding the lantern in her hands, and made her way to the front door. Outside, the night was cool and clear, the stars twinkling brightly above. She walked out into the yard, her steps slow and deliberate, her thoughts focused on the lantern's glow and what it represented. She didn't need to go far. The warmth of the lantern could be shared right here in her own neighborhood with the people she passed every day. As she walked, she noticed an elderly neighbor, Mrs. Green, sitting alone on her porch, a blanket draped over her shoulders to ward off the evening chill. Mrs. Green often seemed lonely, her house always quiet, and the child couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy for her. It was then that the idea struck her. She gently carried the lantern across the yard, its soft light glowing warmly in the cool night. As she approached Mrs. Green, she smiled and called out softly. "Good evening, Mrs. Green," the child said, her voice full of warmth and kindness. "I brought you something." Mrs. Green looked up, her eyes narrowing in curiosity as the child stepped closer, the lantern held out in front of her. The soft glow from the flame illuminated the child's face, casting a peaceful light on the scene. "What's this, dear?" Mrs. Green asked, her voice gentle but tinged with surprise. "This is my little lantern," the child explained. "I've been carrying it around lately, and I thought it might help brighten your evening. It's small, but it's warm, and it has a light that I think can help guide you through the dark." Mrs. Green's expression softened as she looked at the lantern, her lips curving into a gentle smile. "Thank you, dear. It's been a long while since anyone thought to share their light with me." The child placed the lantern gently on the small table beside Mrs. Green's chair, and the elderly woman reached out, her hands trembling slightly as she touched the cool brass. The light, though soft and small, seemed to fill the space around them, casting a warm, peaceful glow over the garden and the house beyond. Mrs. Green sighed, a peaceful look spreading across her face. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel quite so alone. The child sat beside her, content to share the lantern's glow in silence. The warmth of the light seemed to ease the chill of the evening air, and for a moment, it felt as if the world outside had softened, as though the very night itself had become a little brighter. The lantern's glow, small though it was, had begun to reach out, connecting the two of them in a way that words could not. It wasn't just a flame. It was a bridge between hearts, a shared comfort, a quiet reminder that no one ever had to face the dark alone. As the child stayed by Mrs. Green's side, the old woman began to speak softly, her voice carrying the weight of years spent in solitude. "I used to have a light like this in my life," she said, her voice nostalgic. "When I was younger, my husband would light a lantern like this for me every evening. We'd sit together and talk as the sun set, and it always felt like the light filled our hearts too. It's been many years since I've had a light like that." The child listened, her heart full as Mrs. Green spoke. She had never known about the history behind the lantern's light in the elderly woman's life, but now it made sense. The lantern wasn't just a simple object. It carried memories, stories, and love. It had the power to heal, to connect, and to remind people of the warmth they had once known. As Mrs. Green spoke, the child felt as though the lantern had sparked something deeper in her, a desire to help others, to share light, to bring comfort to anyone who needed it. When the conversation slowed and the silence between them grew comfortable, the child stood and gave Mrs. Green one last smile. "I think I'll leave the lantern with you for a while, if you don't mind." she said. "I think it will make your evenings a little brighter, just like it did for me." Mrs. Green nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Thank you, dear. You've already brightened my heart more than you know." With that, the child turned to go, her heart swelling with a quiet sense of fulfillment. She had shared her light, not just with Mrs. Green, but with a part of herself. She had realized that the lantern's glow didn't just bring comfort. It could help heal wounds, rekindle lost connections, and spread warmth to those who needed it most. As she walked back toward her house, the lantern's light still glowing warmly in Mrs. Green's garden, the child felt a deep sense of peace. The glow had traveled beyond the walls of her own room, beyond the confines of her small world. It had touched someone else's heart, and in doing so, it had deepened the child's understanding of what light truly meant. It was more than just a source of warmth. It was a bridge between souls, a quiet force that could help guide people out of the darkness. And in that moment, the child knew that the lantern's glow, no matter how small, could travel far and wide, touching the lives of all who needed it. Chapter 9. The Light That Returned. As the days moved forward, the seasons deepened into the heart of autumn. The world outside seemed to change with each passing breeze. The golden leaves now carpeted the ground, and the nights grew longer, the air crisp with the scent of earth and wood. The child continued her routine of lighting the lantern each evening. But now, it wasn't just a ritual. It was a reminder of the warmth and connection she had shared with Mrs. Green. The lantern, once a forgotten object in the attic, had become something much more. It had become a symbol, a beacon of light that connected people, reminded them of the importance of sharing warmth, and served as a quiet reminder that no one ever had to face the dark alone. One evening, as the child prepared to light the lantern, she paused, her fingers brushing gently against its brass frame. She hadn't seen Mrs. Green in a few days. At first, the child had been content with the knowledge that she had left the lantern with her, knowing it was providing comfort and warmth during the evenings. But lately, she felt a growing sense of curiosity. How was Mrs. Green doing with the lantern? Had it truly made a difference, as the child hoped it would? With a soft sigh, the child decided to visit Mrs. Green once again, to check on her, to see if the lantern was still lighting up her evenings. She carefully wrapped the lantern in a cloth to protect it, just as she had when she first shared its glow, and stepped out into the crisp evening air. The walk through the quiet streets felt different this time, as if the night itself was waiting, holding its breath for what was to come. The streetlights flickered softly as the child made her way to Mrs. Green's home, the lantern's glow warming her hands as she walked. When she arrived at Mrs. Green's house, she was greeted by an unexpected sight. The porch light was on, a soft glow spilling out into the yard. Mrs. Green was sitting on her porch, but this time she wasn't alone. There was another figure beside her, an older man with silver hair and kind eyes, sitting beside her in quiet conversation. The child hesitated for a moment, watching the two of them from the edge of the yard. She had never seen Mrs. Green with anyone else before, and the sight of them sharing a moment of companionship brought a smile to her face. As she approached, Mrs. Green looked up and saw her face lighting up with recognition. "Oh dear," she called out, waving her hand in greeting. Come, I'm so glad you're here." The child walked up the porch steps, her heart beating a little faster with the anticipation of what might come next. Mrs. Green gestured to the empty chair beside her. "Please, sit. I want you to meet someone," Mrs. Green said warmly. "This is my brother, Henry. He's come to visit after many years, and I've been telling him all about the lantern you brought me." The child blinked in surprise, glancing at the elderly man. His eyes twinkled with kindness, and his smile was gentle as he held out his hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you, young one," he said. "I've heard so much about your kindness." The child sat down beside them, placing the lantern carefully on the small table in front of them. Mrs. Green turned to Henry, her voice filled with emotion. "You know, Henry, this little lantern has been the brightest light in my life these past few days. It's brought me comfort when I needed it most, and I know it's thanks to this kind child that I've felt less alone." Henry smiled and nodded, his eyes softening. "It seems like it's not just the lantern that's special, but the heart that carries it," he said. "It's clear that the kindness and care that were shared with you, dear sister, are what really make the light shine." The child's heart swelled with warmth as she listened to their conversation. She hadn't expected her small act of kindness to lead to something so meaningful. She hadn't expected Mrs. Green's life to change so deeply, or for it to inspire a reunion with her brother. The lantern, once merely an object, had now become a symbol of connection, of love, and of the importance of sharing light with others. Mrs. Green reached over and gently placed her hand on the child's. "I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "The lantern you gave me has filled my nights with light, but it's also brought me back to a time when I wasn't so alone. And now, my brother is here with me, sharing stories and laughter once again. I don't think I can ever express how much that means to me." The child smiled softly, her eyes glistening with quiet joy. "I'm just glad I could help," she said. "The lantern did its part, but it was your heart that made the difference." The lantern, now resting between the three of them, seemed to glow even brighter, its warm light casting a peaceful glow on their faces. The child looked at it with a sense of wonder. What had started as a simple act of kindness had grown into something much more profound. The lantern had sparked a series of events that had brought people together, healed old wounds, and created new connections. It wasn't just a light that filled a room, it was a light that filled hearts. As the evening wore on, the child stayed with Mrs. Green and Henry, listening to their stories and laughing along with them. The lantern remained at the center of their conversation, its light a constant, gentle reminder of the power of small acts of kindness. And when the night finally came to a close, the child left, her heart light and full, knowing that the lantern's glow had touched something far beyond what she had ever imagined. And so, the child learned that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can ripple out into the world in ways we never expect. The lantern, small as it was, had lit up more than just rooms. It had brought people together, mended old ties, and reminded everyone that no one should ever have to face the darkness alone. Chapter 10. The Everlasting Glow. The days continued to shorten as the year neared its end, and winter crept in, wrapping the world in its quiet, icy embrace. The child, now with the lantern's glow ever present in her heart, had learned so much about the power of light, how it didn't just illuminate physical spaces, but also brought warmth to the soul. Each evening, when she lit the lantern, she no longer saw it just as a source of light. It was a reminder of everything she had shared and learned, the connections it had forged, the comfort it had provided, and the way it had brightened her own life just by being there. But as the coldest part of winter settled in, the child began to feel a gentle tug in her heart. She had given the lantern to Mrs. Green, and while she knew it had brought joy and warmth to the elderly woman, the child also felt a longing to hold the lantern close once more. Not out of selfishness, but because she had come to realize that the lantern wasn't just something to share. It was a part of her too, and it had a special meaning. It was a symbol of how small acts of kindness could create ripples of light that spread out, creating warmth in the coldest of hearts. One evening, as the first snowflakes of the season began to fall softly from the sky, the child bundled up in her warmest coat, wrapped a scarf tightly around her neck, and made her way to Mrs. Green's house. The lantern, which had been left with her, had become a part of the old woman's nightly ritual. The child wondered if the time had come for it to return to her, so that she could light it again in her room, feeling the comfort of its glow as she settled in for sleep. The journey to Mrs. Green's house felt different this time. The streets, covered in a soft dusting of snow, looked as if they had been transformed into a winter wonderland. The world hushed under a blanket of quiet beauty. The child's breath came out in puffs, drifting in the cold air as she walked, her footsteps soft on the snowy ground. It was the kind of night where everything felt peaceful, as though the world itself was at rest, waiting for something new to unfold. When she reached Mrs. Green's porch, she noticed that the lantern was still glowing softly through the window, its warm light spilling out into the yard. The child smiled, knowing that the lantern had brought something precious into the lives of those it touched. She knocked gently on the door, the sound barely more than a whisper in the quiet of the evening. Mrs. Green opened the door with a wide smile, her eyes alight with recognition. "Ah, it's you," she said warmly. "Come in, dear, come in." The child stepped inside, and the warmth of the house enveloped her, wrapping her in a sense of comfort that seemed to seep into her bones. The lantern was still on the small table by the window, its gentle light filling the room with a peaceful glow. "I've been thinking," the child began softly, her voice filled with the same tenderness that had accompanied the gift of the lantern in the first place. "I think it's time for the lantern to come back home with me, if you're ready to part with it. It's always been my reminder of the warmth we share with others, and I think it's time for me to hold it close again." Mrs. Green's face softened as she looked at the lantern, her eyes filled with a quiet understanding. "I knew this day would come," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "But I must say, this little lantern has brought more light into my life than I ever could have expected. It has given me warmth not only in the room, but also in my heart. I never thought that something so small could make such a difference. But now I understand. You gave me something precious, something that has helped me reconnect with my past and with those I love. I will never forget that." The child smiled, feeling a quiet peace wash over her. Mrs. Green's words were a reminder of how deeply the lantern had touched them both, how it had become a part of their shared journey. "I'm glad it's meant so much to you," she said, her voice soft with emotion. "But it's not just about the lantern. It's about what it represents, the light we can offer to others, no matter how small we think it is. We all have that light inside us, and when we share it, we create warmth that spreads further than we might ever know." Mrs. Green nodded, her hands gently caressing the brass edges of the lantern. "You're right, dear," she said, her voice filled with a quiet strength. "And I think it's time for you to carry that light with you, just as you did when you first brought it to me." The child reached out, carefully lifting the lantern from the table and cradling it in her hands. It was just as she remembered, its glow soft and steady, a small flame of warmth in the stillness of the night. As she held it, she realized that the lantern wasn't something she would ever truly leave behind. Its light had become a part of her, just as she had become a part of the lives she had touched along the way. The light would always find its way back to her, just as she would always share it with others, no matter where life took her. With a final smile, the child hugged Mrs. Green tightly. "Thank you for sharing this light with me," she said, her voice full of gratitude. "I'll carry it with me, wherever I go." Mrs. Green's eyes glistened with tears, but her smile was full of warmth. "And I'll carry the memory of this lantern and the light you've shared with me forever in my heart." As the child stepped back into the winter night, the lantern's glow warm and steady in her hands, she felt a deep sense of peace. The world outside was cold and quiet, but within her heart, there was a warmth that could never be extinguished. The lantern had taught her that no matter how small the light, it had the power to shine brightly, to bring warmth and connection, and to spread kindness far and wide. And with the lantern in her hands, The child knew that the light she shared with others would continue to grow, lighting the way for all those who needed it. It was a light that would never fade, a light that would always return, no matter how far it traveled or how long it was carried. For light, like love, could never truly be extinguished. It would always find its way home.